welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 162. And today's date is September 13th, 2013. And the title of this episode is "The Build-Up to the Horrifying False Flag Event." And the reason for this title is that the central bankers, U.S. government, Israel, they tried everything to get the war started with Syria, and it kind of fell flat. The American people were not for it. The Congress was not for it. And they needed an escape plan. And they needed maneuverability. And this is where we are at right now, where the U.S., Russia, and Syria are trying to work out what they're going to do with Assad's chemical weapons. That doesn't mean it's over. What they'll do next, they realize now the American people are not for a war. Congress has no interest in a war. So what do they do next? They bring it home to the U.S. and they have already started the propaganda. Now we have to remember a couple of things. Number one, they've been using the propaganda of cyber attacks for over a year and a half. So we know for a fact this is what they do. They slowly build it up over time to let everyone know that something's coming. So we know eventually a huge cyber attack will occur. They are building now the propaganda for Al-Qaeda, lone wolves, attacking the U.S. And we have already seen today a message coming out that says Al-Qaeda is going to hit the U.S. And here we are. And this is what I thought was going to happen, because I've said this in many reports. If they cannot get what they want, they always move it up a notch. And again, if this doesn't work, they'll move it up another notch. And the last false flag that they will try to bring it all home is the doomsday cyber attack false flag. But before we get into that entire discussion, let's get into the economic collapse news. We're going out to Spain, and out there, their public debt climbs to a record 92.2% of GDP. And what they are seeing there, that the Bank of Spain announced on Friday that the Spanish debt for the period between April and June surpassed the government's year-end target of 91.4% of GDP. And it's going higher and higher. And what we realize out in Spain is that unemployment, the country's unemployment right now, their unemployment rate is 27%, and their rate for unemployment between the ages of 16 and 24. Now, these are supposed to be the young adults that are coming into the industry to get jobs, make some income, put more money into the system to pay off this debt, and this is what is supposed to happen. But when you have a jobless rate of 55%, it is impossible to do. It's over half of the youth population. This cannot be sustained in this fashion. So what's going to happen? The same thing that has happened to Greece, the same thing that's happening to Cyprus, the same thing that's going to happen throughout Europe and America. What's going to happen is unemployment will continue to go up. The debt will continue to go up. Revenues will continue to go down. What happens in this situation? In a normal corporation, it's called a bankruptcy. In a country, it's called a collapse. So, yes, they can keep things going for a while. A corporation can borrow some more money, but if their revenue's not there, they'll borrow a little bit more until the banks say, no, we can't lend you any more money. This is it. You need to file bankruptcy. You are done. The same thing's going to happen to countries. Eventually, when the debt gets so high, and they look at the debt, they look at the revenue, they look at what the country is producing, they finally say, no more. The United States is a different situation. They have a printing press, and they can continually print money, but we know what happens when money is continually printed. The value of the dollar declines, and they can't keep it up forever. And this is the problem that they're seeing now, because what happens is they start seeing bubbles form. We see a stock market bubble. We see a treasury bubble. We see a student loan bubble. We're seeing a housing bubble. And again, we have to remember the Fed is printing this money, but they do not want this money getting out into the entire country. So they're giving it to the banks, and they're purchasing their toxic real estate, and they're giving the money for this toxic real estate, and they're instructed to put it back into the equity markets, and that's why we see the stock market going up. And that's why around the country, the actual economy is not doing well. They're not seeing any of this money. Plus, if they did start funneling this money into the economy, we would see hyperinflation. So what the Fed is doing is not good for the people, and it's not good for the economy. It is very good for the 1%ers. That is it. And we have to remember the Fed is not here to help the people. They are here to help themselves. The Federal Reserve is a private company. It's not part of the government. Just like any other company, they are doing everything for themselves and not the general public. Okay. Now, consumer confidence is the biggest miss on record, and we can just imagine why that is, because what we're seeing now is the data from retail sales has come in, and we see retail sales barely rose, increasing at the lowest possible pace of 0.1%, below the expected 0.3% rate. But general merchandise stores went so far to post a negative 0.2% dip. And what we're seeing, and I know I talk about real estate quite a bit, that we're seeing mortgage applications plunge, and I talked about the foot traffic to new home builders. I talked about gardening stores, home furnishing stores, where sales are starting to decline. Well, here are the numbers. Gardening stores, home furnishing, negative 0.9% drop. So this just goes to show you that the real estate market is in a decline. Everything starts to make sense now. And clothing retailers, and we've been seeing a lot of clothing retailers saying that their sales are down, and it's because people are buying cars. I mean, they make up so many different things. It's really funny. It's the weather. It's because people are buying cars instead of clothing. But they have a negative 0.8% drop in August. And as we move into the holiday season, their expectations are probably going to be very high. But I am almost positive that every single sale from every single retailer is going to miss these expectations, and they're going to be a lot worse than what everyone believes they're going to be. Now, Goldman Sachs has come out, and they're projecting that gold may drop below $1,000 an ounce. And they did this once before back in April, where they went and said that they are bearish on gold, and it was literally the next day, gold dropped around $200 or so. And then about 3 days after that, they said they're no longer bearish. And we understand during that period, they were gobbling up everything that everyone was selling. And now they're the 7th largest holder of gold ETFs at this point. So here they are again. And I've said this over and over, and we're seeing that gold is holding steady, being pushed down. They do not want the American people to realize that the economy is a lot worse than it really is. They will do everything in their power to keep that stock market as high as possible, especially on Fridays. They love ending the week on a positive note. This way people go into the weekend, they feel all good and everything is great, and the stock market's up. That means everything is good. That means companies are profitable, and they look at gold. Oh, gold is going down. That must mean because the economy is doing much better and people don't need gold anymore, because we understand that gold is used as an insurance policy just in case the economy collapses. So this is the picture they're painting. But we understand that the economy is falling apart. It's ripping apart, falling apart, and they're trying to hold it together with tape. And they're doing this until they can get to this fall or early winter. And before this happens, they need to start a war to cover up what is actually going to happen. And this is what they are trying to do. And I know a lot of people are like, oh, look, it's all working out. Everything seems great. We got this deal from Russia. And I will continue to say they are not done. This is just a little, bump in the road, a little detour for a little while. But believe me, they have been planning this for over 25 years to get into Syria and Iran. General Wesley Clark came out with the list of all the countries they were going to invade, and here they are with the last two. They know what they need to do, and they know they need to do it any way they can. Okay, now, I talked yesterday about how the news always comes out with great headlines telling you how great everything is doing, and there was a piece, I think it was from the Economic Collapse blog, where they were comparing the Depression of 1933 to 2013, and some of the headlines today, recession risk gone in all U.S. states but one. Foreclosure crisis is drawing to a close. Stocks close near highs. S&P long 7-day rally. And these are all the headlines of today, trying to convince everyone that the economy is getting better. And, again, foreclosure crisis drawing to an end, recession risk gone in all U.S. states. So they're telling you that everything is just about to turn the corner and everything is great. But what do we understand? We understand that there are more than 90 million working-age Americans not in the labor force. We understand the labor force participation rate is the lowest that it has been in 35 years. 516,000 Americans left the labor force last month, and they're not counted in the new calculation that the BLS puts out, because you have to remember that was completely changed as of 1994. They manipulate inflation, GDP, and unemployment statistics. The number of private sector jobs dropped by 278,000 last month. 77% of the jobs that have been created so far this year have been part-time. Now, I talk about layoffs and different companies laying off, and we see that these layoffs are getting, the amount of people is getting larger and larger. I mean, look at just in the mortgage industry, J.P. Morgan Chase they might lay off upward of 15,000 people in the mortgage industry. Wells Fargo, around 2,000. Bank of America, 2,100. Meredith Whitney came out and said this fall, early winter, Wall Street will be laying off around 100,000 people on Wall Street. All right, let me continue here. Right now, 40% of U.S. workers are making less than what a full-time minimum wage worker made back in 1968. And just to let you know how bad things are, one of the largest furniture manufacturers in America was just forced into bankruptcy, and I just mentioned that, I think, 2 reports ago. Now, yesterday I talked about the new media shield law and how they're trying to pass this bill that will shield the media. But when I started looking into this and I started to read some more, this is not protecting people like myself that talk about the news, alternative media, because some of their requirements of media is someone with a substantial track record of freelancing in the last 5 years, or a student of journalism, or a journalist would be defined as an individual who is in contract with or employed by a media outlet for at least 1 year within the last 20 years. So this would leave out any unpaid journalist, alternative media, anyone else on the internet. So this is how they're trying to control the flow of information. And I've said this in my other reports. They need the control of the production of the creation of money, which they have. They need control of the media outlets, which they have. And now they need control over the alternative media and the internet, because that is like the Wild West to them, and they have no controls over it. And there's people like myself and a lot of other people out there telling people different sides to the story, going deeper into what they say, and finding other evidence that is not true, and they do not want this to happen. And this is why they have the CISPA pending in the Senate, and they are just waiting for the right moment to spring an event on the people to pass that law. Now, there's a whole Homeland Security project, and their core mission is to be an active bipartisan voice on Homeland Security and national security issues. And this goes on to say that cybersecurity experts agree that the next 911 is likely to be a cyber attack. And the emerging threats in the country today are Al-Qaeda moving into these lone wolf organizations, which they are very hard to track, plus homegrown extremists who may target U.S. interests. So they're looking at American citizens now as domestic terrorists, and they're also looking at this new Al-Qaeda lone wolf terrorist type of group that they are looking into. And we can see where this is leading. They are making the case for the cyber attack. We've already heard of domestic terrorists. They keep, DHS has been put in place to control those people who are not for the government, who might want to overthrow the government if and when the time is right. And they are looking for those people who talk negatively about the government. But again, this is why the Bill of Rights are there, because our founding fathers realized that you need to keep the government in check, and you should be able to speak your mind about what you feel is right and wrong and what's going on. But we can see what's happening here. They're putting everyone into groups. They are tracking them. And when the time is right, they're going to start rounding people up unless the people do something. Okay, now the China military tells U.S. not to encourage Japan over the island disputes. And right now, China is saying they told the United States this week not to support Japan nor let it do as it pleased over a group of disputed islands in the East China Sea. And this is from the Chinese defense minister. And we understand that Japan is trying to change their constitution, Article 6 or 9, I forgot which one, but it's one of the articles where they're no longer a pacifist nation, where they're able to attack and defend allies. And China is trying to say to the U.S., uh, you know, don't get involved here. And this goes on to say that this issue should not become a problem between China and the United States, and China hopes that the United States does not become a third party in this issue. The United States should maintain a consistent stance and policy, not send wrong signals nor support and connive with a relevant country to do as they please. The United States also has a hefty military presence in Japan, including the southern island of Okinawa, which is very close to the disputed islands. So they're telling United States, do not get involved in this. But guess what's going to happen? We understand that World War III is happening. It's in the making, and we understand that it's going to be between Russia, U.S., China, Syria, Iran, and Japan is going to be involved, North and South Korea, European nations. It's going to be everyone, and you can see how this is all building up. In my previous reports, I talked about how the U.S. is setting up bases which is circling China right now. We're establishing and moving military assets all over the globe. Japan has just built their largest warship since World War II. India has come out with their submarine and warship. We're building a defensive missile base in Romania. The Russians are in Armenia, setting up a brand new modernized base there and setting up their missiles. So we can see how this is playing out. Things are moving forward. And as of right now with Syria, the Pentagon is extending the U.S. warships near Syria. And they're keeping them in the area. It's the USS Nimitz is going to stay there. The USS Barry is going to stay there. And the USS Barry is a destroyer in the Mediterranean, and the USS Nimitz is an aircraft carrier. And they've been instructed to stay in the area. Now, Russia is bringing in 10 warships and going to keep these warships in the Mediterranean area. And this goes on to say that the Russian Navy intends to build its presence in the Mediterranean Sea, particularly in the area close to Syrian shores, to up to 10 battleships. This was announced from Admiral of the Fleet, Viktor Cherkov, and he says the task is crystal clear: to avoid a slightest threat to the security of the state. And we can see that Russia understands that the central bankers, U.S. government, Israel, is not going to stop. They are not going to go away peacefully and say, okay, chemical weapons are gone. We no longer we don't need to be in this area. No, they are creating a new plan, a new false flag to get into Iran or Syria right now. Dianne Feinstein was on the floor this Wednesday talking about Assad, and she went on to say that he has the capacity to kill tens of thousands with chemical weapons. And she said, if the world doesn't respond now, we bear responsibility for a larger tragedy happening later. And Feinstein said, if diplomatic efforts to disarm Syria of its chemical weapons fail, I know we're going to be back here on the floor debating a war resolution for military strike. And they are still beating the war drums because they want to keep Congress, the American people, and keep it in their mind how bad they're trying to make Assad look, that he used chemical weapons, even though almost all the evidence is saying that he did not. And Kerry is still out there saying that even though we have these talks, the U.S. may still strike Syria because they want to keep it in everyone's minds. So when the time is right, everyone thinks strike, strike, and this is what they're doing right now. And I also find it very interesting that right after Kerry was finished with meeting with the Russian leader, he flew right off to Israel to meet and explain what happened and to get, I guess, additional instructions of what he needs to do next. And I find it very odd that most of the leaders of the U.S., after they are in talks like this, fly off to Israel. Now, there are 10 reasons why a diplomatic solution to Syria crisis is extremely unlikely. Number one, Assad wants a guarantee that he will not be attacked by the United States, and there's no way this is going to happen. Assad is not going to agree to any chemical weapons deal unless the U.S. stops giving weapons to Al-Qaeda terrorists. Well, we know that's not going to happen. Assad is suggesting that the Israelis should give up their weapons of mass destruction. That's not going to happen either. The Syrian rebels desperately want the U.S. military to intervene in the war. Well, of course, they're the paid mercenaries from the U.S. government, and they want the U.S. involved. This way, it will give them a huge advantage because they are losing right now. Saudi Arabia desperately wants the U.S. military to intervene. They spent billions of dollars to support the rebels, and they really, want this to happen. And you have to remember, the Saudis are a puppet government which is controlled by the U.S. government, and they'll do whatever the U.S. government wants. Number 6, Qatar desperately wants the U.S. military to intervene in Syria. Same exact thing. I mean, every country that's receiving aid and tons of money, they all want this because they want this money to continue. And Turkey also, same exact thing. And many members of the U.S. Congress want this war, like, John McCain, Lindsey Graham, but there's a lot of people in Congress that do not want this war, and that was quite evident with only 10% supporting this war this time. And there's also been reports that the U.S. soldiers are now receiving orders to deploy to Syria. A venture capitalist, Don Bubalo, claims he was told by a source close to Fort Hood that U.S. troops have been ordered to deploy to Syria right now. And we understand that they've been planning this because there is a CENTCOM base, which is underground, that holds 270 officers that was going to be used and still be used to handle everything that has to do with Syria and Iran, and all the operations would be run out of there. We also understand that they were training paid mercenaries for months in Jordan. They shipped over the training materials, F-16 Patriot missiles and other military assets to Jordan, and they just kept them there after the training. We also understand that there's about 2,200 Marines that could be in Syria within hours. All the warships that they sent over, especially one that was carrying 800 more Marines. And we understand that they are ready and they are still on the warpath. They have not given up. And now there is another FBI warning of a possible cyber attack from Syria. They are just keeping this propaganda going to get everyone used to that from all these warnings. Yes, they warned us. Yes, they warned us. And eventually it happens. And this goes on to say that the Federal Bureau of Investigation is urging the public to keep alert and watch for malicious online behavior as the world watches the unfolding situation in Syria. New cyber threats are emerging that could impact the daily lives of millions of Americans. The Department of Homeland Security said is closely following this situation and sharing information with local governments to address these cyber threats that might occur. Now, to build up the propaganda of how this whole agreement with Russia is not going to work, we see they're using the same exact tactic that they used with Iraq. They're saying that Assad now is smuggling his chemical weapons out of the country. They're hiding them, and this is not in accordance with the agreement, and we can see what path they are marching down. They are marching down the path to war. And lo and behold, today, Al-Qaeda calls for attacks inside the United States. Ayman al-Zawahiri urge small-scale attacks inside the United States to bleed America economically. They understand the economy is weak at this point, and they understand that they can hit it and bleed America. And he added that he hopefully and eventually to see a more significant strike. We understand that this is propaganda to brainwash the American people and to set up this false flag. They tried the false flag out in Syria with chemical weapons. How many times did they use the chemical weapons story until the main event happened? 3, 4 times, let's say? They are going to do the same thing right now. They've already started the propaganda. FBI out again, saying something about a cyber attack. Here, they already talked about lone wolves, and they already made that case. So now, here's Al-Qaeda already coming out, saying that they're going to attack. And this goes on to say that Western counterterrorism chiefs have warned that radicalized lone wolves, who might have no direct contact with Al-Qaeda, posed a great risk as those who carried out complex plots like 9/11. And this also went on to say, we should bleed America economically by provoking it to continue in its massive expenditure on its security, for the weak point of America is its economy. And we can see what they're trying to do here. They are setting this up. They are building the propaganda, because the chemical attack did not work in Syria. The people didn't feel it. The Congress didn't feel it. Everyone felt it had nothing to do with them personally. So what do the central bankers and the U.S. government and Israel need to do? They need to bring this here to America and make it personal. They realize the American people and Congress are not for war. The only way to make people want something is to bring something horrific, horrifying, bloody, right to their front door. And this is what they're doing right now. They are building this up, and they're waiting for the right moment. Now, this could be combined with a cyber attack to hit, because again, I discussed this over and over in episode 138 and other episodes, that this fall and winter, which I'm saying this is the time frame. Hey, I could be completely wrong, but right now it's fitting in to everything that's going on. God, I wish I am completely wrong, and and everything just goes away. The war stopped, everyone goes on living, and the economy's great. But when I look at the evidence, that's not what it is. That's not what's happening, and everything is pointing to something happening. Now, again, the time frame might be a little bit off, but eventually it will happen. And I'm looking right now at fall, early winter. And they are building, everything that I talked about, it seems like they're following the track. They tried to get into war. And those people who've been with me, I've been talking about this for a very long time. It didn't work out. And I've said, if it doesn't work out, they're going to move to the next stage and bring it and make it worse. And here we are. They're doing this now. They're building up the propaganda. They're telling us what's going to happen. And what's happening this fall is that the Fed needs to taper. And they might start tapering to make it look like they're going to do it, but something will happen which will screw up everything, and it will be blamed on another country. And it seems like they are playing right into this. And this could be combined with a cyber attack to, cripple the economy. It could be also have small explosions or a small gas attack, chemical weapons attack, something like that, because they're telling us, there could be small events happening and something large. So we need to be prepared. You need to be ready because we do not know what's coming. And if they can't get this war started with this next false flag that's coming, they will move on to the next one, which would be the doomsday one, because all bets are off. They have nowhere to go. They're like wild animals backed into a corner. They're going to come out growling, swinging, biting, and they will do anything and everything to get what they want. Listen, everyone, I will be doing a news brief on Saturday. Those people who are on my alert system, you'll get the email as when I send it out. Those people on YouTube, you can just check back and look for that. Again, just a reminder, I do post the reports much earlier on the x22report.com site. It is much easier to do because it's just audio, and then I start the compiling of the videos, and sometimes it takes me a little bit longer to compile then to upload to YouTube, and that's why you see it later. So if you want to hear it earlier, just come to the x22report.com. You can download the MP3, listen to it right on the site, however you want to do it. Listen, everyone, be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot for listening, everyone.